The Cricket in Times Square, Chapters 5 and 6. Chapter 5 is called Sunday Morning. The next morning, Mario came back to the newsstand with his father. Usually he slept late on Sunday, but today he was up before either of his parents and kept urging Papa Bellini to hurry. They lifted off the cover, and Mario dashed inside. He held up the matchbox and looked in. There was Chester, lying on the Kleenex. The cricket wasn't asleep, though. He had been waiting for Mario. He chirped once. Papa smiled when he heard the chirp. "He must like it here," he said. "He didn't run away in the night." "I knew he wouldn't," said Mario. For breakfast, Mario had brought a crust of bread, a lump of sugar, and a cold Brussels sprout. He wasn't quite sure what crickets liked, so he decided to try him out on everything. Chester jumped over Mario's little finger into the palm of his hand where the food was. Back in the meadow, his usual diet was leaves and grass, and every now and then a piece of tender bark. But here in New York, he was eating bread and candy and liverwurst and finding them very tasty at that. When Chester had had as much as he wanted, Mario wrapped what was left in a piece of wax paper and put it inside the cash register. Then he slipped the cricket back inside the matchbox and took him over to one of the lunch counters. "Look," he said to the counterman, "this is my new pet. He's a cricket." The counterman's name was Mickey. He had red curly hair. "That's a fine cricket," he said, peering in at Chester. "May he have a glass of water, please?" asked Mario. Mickey said, "Sure," and gave him the glass. Mario held Chester by the hind legs and lowered him carefully until his head was just above the water. Chester dunked his head in and had a big drink. Then he pulled it out, took a breath, and went in for another. "Why don't you let him stand on the rim?" said Mickey. He was very interested in watching Chester, since he had never seen a cricket drinking from a glass before. Mario set his pet on the edge of the glass and gently drew his hand away. Chester bent down to try to reach the water, but the glass was too slippery. He toppled in. Mario hauled him out and dried him off with a paper napkin. But Chester didn't mind the dunking. He had fallen in the brook a couple of times back in Connecticut, and he knew it would take him a while to get used to city life, like drinking out of glasses. "How would the cricket like a soda?" asked Mickey. "Very much, I think," said Mario. "What flavor?" Mickey asked. Mario thought a minute. "Strawberry, I guess," he answered. That happened to be his own favorite flavor. Mickey took a tablespoon and put a drop of strawberry syrup into it. Then he added a drop of cream, a squirt of soda water, and a dip of ice cream about as big as your fingernail. That is how you make a cricket strawberry soda. He also made one for Mario, a little larger than Chester's, but not too big because it was free. When the sodas were gone, Mickey took a paper cup and wrote "Cricket" on it. "This is his own cup," he said to Mario. "You can come over and get fresh water any time." "Thanks, Mickey," said Mario. He put Chester back in the matchbox. "I've got to go to get him a house now." "Bring him back soon," Mickey called after them. "I'll make him a sundae too." At the newsstand, Papa Bellini was talking to Mr. Smedley. Mr. Smedley was the best customer the Bellinis had. He was a music teacher who came to buy Musical America at 10:30 in the morning on the last Sunday of every month, on his way home from church. No matter what the weather was like, he always carried a long, neatly rolled umbrella. As usual, Papa and Mr. Smedley had been talking about opera. More than anything else, the Bellini family liked Italian opera. Every Saturday during the winter, when the opera was broadcast, they would sit clustered around the radio in the newsstand, straining to hear the music above the din of the subway station. "Good morning, Mr. Smedley," said Mario. "Guess what I have?" Mr. Smedley couldn't guess. "A cricket," said Mario, and held Chester up for the music teacher to see. "How delightful," said Mr. Smedley. "What an enchanting little creature." "Do you want to hold him?" asked Mario. Mr. Smedley shrank back. "Oh, I don't think so," he said. "I was stung by a bee when I was 8 years old, and since then I've been a little timid about insects." "He won't sting you," said Mario. He tipped the matchbox up, and Chester fell out in Mr. Smedley's hand. It made the music teacher shiver to feel him. "I heard him chirping last night," said Mario. "Do you think he'd chirp for me?" asked Mr. Smedley. "Maybe," said Mario. He put Chester on the counter and said, "Chirp, please." Then, so Chester couldn't misunderstand, he made a chirping noise himself. It didn't sound much like a cricket, but Chester got the idea. He uncrossed his wings and made a real chirp. Papa and Mr. Smedley exclaimed with delight. "That was a perfect middle C," said Mr. Smedley. He raised his hand like an orchestra conductor, and when he lowered it, Chester chirped on the downbeat. "Do you want to give him music lessons, Mr. Smedley?" asked Mario. "What could I teach him?" said Mr. Smedley. "He's already been taught by the greatest teacher of all, Mario, Nature herself. She gave him his wings to rub together and the instinct to make such lovely sounds. I could add nothing to the genius of this little black Orpheus." "Who is Orpheus, Mr. Smedley?" asked Mario. "Orpheus was the greatest musician who ever lived," said the music teacher. "Long, long ago, he played on a harp, and he played it so beautifully that not only human beings, but animals and even the rocks and trees and waterfalls stopped their work to listen to him. The lion left off chasing the deer, the rivers paused in their courses, and the wind held its breath. The whole world was silent." Mario didn't know what to say. He liked that picture of everyone keeping quiet to listen. "That must have been awfully good playing," he said finally. Mr. Smedley smiled. "It was," he said. "Perhaps someday your cricket will play as well. I prophesy great things for a creature of such ability, Mario." "You hear?" said Papa Bellini. "He could be famous, maybe." Mario heard all right, and he remembered what Mr. Smedley had said later on that summer. But right now he had other things on his mind. "Papa, can I go down to Chinatown and get my cricket a house?" he asked. "A house? What kind of a house?" said his father. "Jimmy Lebowski said that the Chinese like crickets very much, and they build special cages for them," Mario explained. "It's Sunday," said Papa. "There won't be any stores open." "Well, there may be 1 or 2 open," said Mario. "It's Chinatown, and besides, I could see where to go later on." "All right, Mario," Papa Bellini began, But Mario wasn't waiting for any buts. He scooped Chester into the matchbox, shouted goodbye, Mr. Smedley, over his shoulder, and headed for the stairway leading to the downtown subway trains. Papa and Mr. Smedley watched him go. Then Papa turned to the music teacher with a happy, hopeless expression on his face, shrugged his shoulders, and the two of them began talking about opera again. And that's the end of Chapter 5. Chapter 6, Sei Fong. Mario took the IRT local subway downtown. He held the matchbox up at the level of his chest so the cricket could see out. This was the first time Chester had been able to watch where he was going on the subway. The last time, he had been buried under roast beef sandwiches. He hung out of the box, gazing up and down the car. Chester was a curious cricket, and as long as he was here in New York, he meant to see as much as he could. He was staring at an old lady wearing a straw hat, wondering if the flowers on it were real, and if they were, what they would taste like when the train lurched to a halt. Like most people who first ride the subway, Chester wasn't used to the abrupt stops. He toppled out of the matchbox into Mario's lap. The boy picked him up again. "You've got to be careful," he said, putting his finger over the open end of the box so there was just enough room for Chester to poke his head out. At the Canal Street stop, Mario got off and walked over several blocks to Chinatown. Chester craned his head out as far as he could to get his first look at New York by day. The buildings in this part of town weren't nearly as high as they were in Times Square, but they were still high enough to make Chester Cricket feel very small. In Chinatown, as Papa had said, all the shops were closed. Mario walked up and down the narrow, curving streets, zigzagging across them so he could look in the windows on both sides. In some, he saw the cardboard shells that open up into beautiful paper flowers if you put them in a glass of water, and in others, the glass wind harps that tinkle when they're hung in the window where the breeze can reach them. But he couldn't find a cricket cage anywhere. Down at the end of an alley, there was an especially old shop. The paint was peeling off the doors, and the windows were crammed with years and years' collection of knickknacks. A sign hanging out in front said, "Sei Fong, Chinese Novelties," and printed underneath in smaller letters was, "Also do hand laundry." Sitting cross-legged on the doorstep was an old Chinese man. He was wearing a silk vest over his shirt with dragons embroidered on it in red thread, and he was smoking a long white clay pipe. Mario stopped and looked in the shop window. The old Chinese man didn't turn his head, but he looked slyly at the boy out of the corner of his eye. Slowly, he drew the pipe out of his mouth and blew a puff of smoke into the air. "Are you Mr. Fong?" asked Mario. The man smoothly twisted his head, as if it were on a pivot, and looked at Mario. "I say Fong," he answered. His voice sounded strange, yet musical, like a plucked violin. Sei Fong had come from China many years ago, and he had a curious way of talking. But Mario liked it very much. He enjoyed the individual chirps of human beings almost as much as those of his cricket. "I would like to buy a cricket cage, if you have any," said Mario. Sei Fong put the pipe back in his mouth and took a few puffs. His eyes became even narrower than they had been before. "You got cricket?" he asked finally, in a voice so soft that Mario could hardly hear it. "Yes," said Mario. "Here he is." He opened the matchbox. Chester and Sei Fong looked at each other. "Oh, very good," said Sei Fong, and a remarkable change came over him. He suddenly became very lively, almost dancing a jig on the sidewalk. "You got cricket. Very good." He was laughing delightedly. Mario was startled by Sei Fong's quick change. "I want to buy him a house," he said. "Come in shop, please," said Sei Fong. He opened the door and they both went in. Mario had never seen such a cluttered room. It was a jumble of Chinese odds and ends. Everything from silk robes to chopsticks to packages of hand laundry littered the shelves and chairs. and there was a faint, sweet smell of incense in the air. Sei Fong brushed a pile of Chinese newspapers to the floor. "You sit, please," he said, motioning Mario to the chair he had cleared. "I back soon." And he disappeared through a door at the back of the shop. Mario sat very quietly. He was afraid that if he moved, he would be buried under an avalanche of Chinese novelties. In a glass case right in front of him was a row of Chinese goddesses carved in ivory. They all had the strangest smile on their lips, as if they knew something nobody else did. And they seemed to be staring straight at Mario. He tried to look at them, but he couldn't keep it up and had to look away. In a few minutes, Sei Fong came back into the room. He was carrying a cricket cage in the shape of a pagoda. There were 7 tiers to it, each one a little smaller than the one below, and it ended in a slender spire. The lower parts of the cage were painted red and green, but the spire was golden. At one side was a gate with a tiny latch on it. Mario wanted to own the cage so much that he tingled all over, but it looked awfully expensive. Sei Fong held up the first finger of his right hand and said solemnly, "This very ancient cricket cage. Once cricket who belonged to Emperor of all China lived in this cage. You know story of first cricket?" "No, sir," said Mario. "Very good," said Sei Fong. "I tell." He set the cage down and took the clay pipe out of his pocket. When it was lit and a thread of smoke was curling up from the bowl, he used the pipe to emphasize what he said, drawing little designs, like Chinese writing in the air. "Long ago, in beginning of time, were no crickets, but was very wise man who knew all things. This man had name Shi Sui and spoke only truth. All secrets were open to him. He knew thoughts of animals and men. He knew desire of flower and tree. He knew destiny of sun and stars. Entire world was single page for him to read. And the high gods who lived in palace at summit of heaven loved Shi Sui because of truth he spoke. Now from many lands came men to hear their fate from Shi Sui. To one he say, 'You very good man, live long as cedar tree on mountainside.' To other he say, 'You wicked man, die soon, goodbye.' But to all men, Shi Sui speak only truth. Of course, wicked men most unhappy when hear what Shi Sui say. They think, 'I wicked man, now everyone know how wicked I am.' So altogether wicked men decided to kill Shi Sui. Shi Sui know very well they want to kill him. He knows everything, but he not care. Within his heart, like smell of sweetness within lotus blossom, Shi Sui have peace, and so he wait. But high gods who live in palace at summit of heaven would not let Shi Sui be killed. More precious to them than kings was this one man who spoke only truth. So when wicked men raise swords above Shi Sui, high gods change him into cricket, and man who spoke only truth and knew all things now sings songs that no man understands and all men love. But high gods understand and smile, for to them beautiful song of cricket is song of one who still speaks truth and knows all things." Sei Fong stopped speaking and smoked his pipe silently. Mario sat still too, looking at the cricket cage. He was thinking about the story and how much he wanted the cage. In his matchbox, Chester Cricket had listened carefully. He was very touched by the tale of Shi Sui. Of course, he couldn't tell if it was true, but he sort of believed it, because he personally had always thought that there was more to his song than just chirping. As usual, when he didn't know what else to do, he rubbed one wing across the other. A single clear note sounded in the shop. Sei Fong lifted his head. A smile curled up the ends of his ancient lips. "Ah, so," he whispered. "Cricket has understood." He puffed a few more times. Mario wanted to ask him how much the cage cost, but he was afraid to. "Because this cricket's so remarkable," said Sei Fong, "I sell cage for 15 cents. Mario sighed with relief. He could afford that. In his pocket he found a nickel and a dime, all that was left of his weekly allowance, which was a quarter. "I'll take it, Mr. Fong," he said, and handed Sei Fong the money. "I also make present free," said Sei Fong. He went behind the counter and took a little bell, no bigger than a honeybee, out of a drawer. With a piece of thread, he hung it up inside the cage. Mario put Chester into the cage. The cricket jumped up and knocked against the bell. It tinkled faintly. "Sound like littlest bell in silver temple, far off up Yangtze River," said Sei Fong. Mario thanked him for the bell, and the story, and everything. As he was about to leave the shop, Sei Fong said, "You want Chinese fortune cookie?" "I guess so," said Mario. "I never had one." Sei Fong took down a can from the shelf. It was full of fortune cookies, thin wafers that had been folded, so there was an air space in each one. Mario bit into a cookie and found a piece of paper inside. He read what it said out loud. "Good luck is coming your way. Be ready." "Ha-hee," laughed Sei Fong. 2 high notes of joy. "Very good advice. You go now. Always be ready for happiness. Goodbye." And that's the end of chapter 6.